Welcome back to Real Life Manifestations, the channel where we explore real manifestation stories, Neville Goddard's teachings, and the principles of the law of assumption to help you transform your own reality. If you're someone who's been wondering whether the law is actually real, or you've been trying to manifest something but your faith has started to waver, then today's story is exactly what you need to hear. Stay with me until the very end, because this isn't just another success story. It's a powerful reminder that the law is always working, even when you think nothing is happening. Sometimes your manifestation shows up exactly as imagined. Other times, it appears in ways that build your faith before the complete manifestation arrives. And once you understand what happened in this story, you may start looking back at your own life and realizing that you've been manifesting all along without even noticing it. Now, let's get into today's real-life manifestation story. I recently came across someone asking a question that many people eventually ask. They were wondering whether the law of assumption is actually real. After all, if you've been imagining, affirming, or doing SATS for weeks or months without seeing obvious results, doubt naturally begins to creep in. Reading that question immediately made me think of several manifestations from my own life. Some were complete manifestations, while others were what I would call partial manifestations. Every single one of them reminded me that imagination is never wasted and that the law is constantly reflecting our inner world back to us. The first experience involves my absolute dream car. For as long as I can remember, I've loved the Mercedes G-63 AMG. It wasn't just another luxury vehicle to me. It was the car. Every time I saw one on the road or watched videos about it online, I imagined what it would feel like to own one. Eventually, I decided that instead of simply admiring it, I was going to manifest it. The technique I relied on the most was SATS, or the state akin to sleep, one of Neville Goddard's most well-known methods. Every night, as I became deeply relaxed, I imagined myself already sitting in the driver's seat of my black G-63 AMG. I wasn't imagining looking at the car from a distance. I wasn't watching myself drive it like a movie. I experienced it from the first-person point of view. My hands rested on the steering wheel. I looked around the interior. I imagined the feeling of sitting behind the wheel. Everything felt as though I already owned it. There was no force involved. No struggle. Just simple imagination. Then something happened only 2 days later. One of my associates became so intoxicated that he couldn't drive himself home. Since he wasn't in any condition to drive, I offered to take him home. Nothing about the situation seemed unusual. It was just one of those unexpected moments life throws at you. But when we walked toward his vehicle, I froze for a second. Would you believe it? He owned a Mercedes G-63 AMG. The only difference was that his was brown instead of black. As soon as I opened the driver's door and sat behind the steering wheel, something clicked instantly. It felt strangely familiar. Within seconds, my SATS sessions flashed through my mind. I realized I was physically experiencing almost the exact same scene I had been imagining just 2 days earlier. The steering wheel, the seating position, the interior, the feeling of being in the driver's seat. It was almost identical to my imaginal act. At that moment, it became impossible for me to dismiss the experience as a coincidence. It wasn't the complete manifestation of owning my own black G-63 AMG, but reality had mirrored my imagination in a very specific way. That experience strengthened my belief more than I expected. It reminded me that imagination is constantly impressing itself upon reality. A few weeks later, I started thinking more practically. As much as I loved the G-63, I realized that insurance costs would probably be much higher than I wanted. So I made a logical decision. I changed my desired vehicle to a Mercedes GLE 63S. I started watching videos about it. I researched the car. I imagined owning it instead. The GLE was beautiful. I genuinely liked it. But deep down, something never changed. My heart still wanted the G-63 AMG. Sometimes we try to convince ourselves that we want something different because it seems more practical or more realistic. But desire has its own language. Eventually, I found myself returning to the G-63 again. That was still the vehicle I truly wanted. At the same time, though, I was also working on several other manifestations. Because my attention was divided among different desires, I wasn't obsessing over the car anymore. I wasn't checking every day to see if it had appeared. I wasn't desperately looking for signs. Life simply continued. Then about a week later, something completely unexpected happened. My phone rang. It was my mother. The excitement in her voice was impossible to miss. She could barely contain herself. She told me that she had just purchased a practically brand new Mercedes GLE. Not only had she bought it, but she had managed to get an incredible deal on it. As if that wasn't surprising enough, there was one more detail. It was the exact color I had imagined for my own GLE. Think about that for a moment. Just weeks after changing my focus toward the GLE, my mother suddenly purchased one, in the exact color I had imagined. Would I say that this was the complete manifestation? No, I wouldn't. But I absolutely consider it a partial manifestation. And sometimes, partial manifestations are just as important as the final result because they build your confidence in the law. They remind you that something is moving behind the scenes. They show you that your imagination is already influencing reality. Many people become discouraged because they're expecting only one specific outcome. If they don't receive the exact result immediately, they conclude that nothing is happening. But reality often unfolds step by step. Sometimes you'll first encounter your desire. Sometimes someone close to you experiences it. Sometimes life brings you into direct contact with the very thing you've been imagining. Each of these experiences can serve as evidence that your imaginal acts are taking root. Looking back, I also realized something that completely changed my perspective. During that period, I wasn't even manifesting from the ideal state. I was still thinking in terms of getting the car. I was focused on obtaining it rather than fully identifying as the person who already owned it. Neville Goddard repeatedly taught that there is a profound difference between wanting something and being the person who already has it. The state of wanting keeps the desire in the future. The state of being places it in the present. At that time, I hadn't fully understood this distinction. Yet despite my imperfect understanding, despite still operating from a mindset of getting, reality still reflected my imagination. That realization gave me enormous confidence. It showed me that the law is always responding. Even when our technique isn't perfect, even when our faith isn't perfect, even when we still have doubts, the law never stops operating. It is always expressing the dominant images we impress upon consciousness. This experience also taught me another valuable lesson. If you take an honest look back over your own life, you'll probably discover countless moments where your imagination quietly became reality. Think about conversations you repeatedly imagined before they happened. Think about places you visualized visiting long before you ever arrived there. Think about people you unexpectedly met after thinking about them over and over again. Think about opportunities that appeared after you spent weeks imagining a different life. At the time, you may have dismissed those events as luck, coincidence, or random chance. But once you begin studying Neville Goddard's teachings, you start recognizing a fascinating pattern. The external world repeatedly reflects the internal world. Sometimes the reflection is immediate. Sometimes it takes weeks. Sometimes it arrives through unexpected people or unusual circumstances. But the connection is there. The more carefully you examine your own experiences, the harder it becomes to believe that it's all coincidence. You'll start noticing intersections everywhere. Moments where your imagination and physical reality overlap in ways that are simply too specific to ignore. And that's one of the greatest ways to strengthen your faith. Not by relying solely on someone else's success story, but by discovering your own. Once you begin recognizing these patterns, your confidence grows naturally because you're no longer believing blindly. You're observing evidence within your own life. That's when manifestation stops being a theory. It becomes your personal experience. So if you're currently feeling discouraged because your desire hasn't fully appeared yet, don't assume nothing is happening. Sometimes reality gives you previews. Sometimes it gives you partial manifestations. Sometimes it brings your desire close enough for you to touch it before placing it completely in your hands. Every one of those moments is an invitation to keep believing instead of giving up. The law is never taking a day off. It never pauses. It never forgets about you. Whether you're consciously using it or not, it is always expressing your assumptions and reflecting your dominant state of consciousness. It is working through you. It is working as you. And it is constantly shaping the reality you experience. One final detail that always makes me laugh. If you ever saw the journal where I wrote all of this down, you'd probably notice my handwriting is far from perfect. I have a habit of letting my writing become a complete mess. So if anyone ever struggles to read it, I completely understand. And if you happen to notice a reference to a super snake in those journal entries, that was simply another car I briefly considered manifesting because of insurance reasons before eventually changing my mind again. Sometimes our desires evolve. Sometimes practicality influences our decisions. But none of that changes the fact that imagination continues to leave its fingerprints on reality. And that, more than anything, is what this story proves. If this story resonated with you, take a moment today to reflect on your own life. Ask yourself where your imagination may have quietly become reality without you giving it much credit. You might be surprised by how many examples you uncover. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more real manifestation experiences that inspire faith and deepen your understanding of Neville Goddard's teachings, make sure to subscribe to Real Life Manifestations and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. If you have your own manifestation success story, big or small, we'd love to hear it. You can share it using the submission form linked in the description or send it to us through our social media pages. Your story could inspire thousands of people who are searching for hope and proof that the law truly works. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, remember, your imagination is creating your reality every single moment. Choose your assumptions wisely, live from the end, trust the unseen, and watch your world transform. See you in the next video.